Alright, so I read The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, by J.R.R. Tolkien, earlier this year, later last year, I guess, technically. I read it in November of 2024, and I was incredibly pleased for a multitude of different reasons. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, I'm a bad reader. I've always been bad. My mind just drifts. You know, when I picture myself as a fifth grader, and you know, they have you spend specific time reading, and I remember just like pretending to turn the pages, and I felt like I was missing out because so many of my friends were reading certain books, reading Harry Potter, the Animorph books, or the Goosebumps. I mean, I read a little bit of Goosebumps. I felt like I was missing out on the actual reading experience. You know, everyone's saying the book is better, and I was like, how could the book be better? I could tell my friends were in love with it, and I just wasn't quite there, and so I really felt like I missed out because I'd be rereading paragraphs and rereading sentences, and it wouldn't stick in my head the way it would theirs. And so that's something I've tried to remedy for most of my life, and only until the last handful of years have I gotten good at it. And I think that's surprised people often, since I'm a writer, that I'm just bad at reading. But I am, and I think a lot of people nowadays are. I think it's a very common thing. But I'm very early in that journey of changing that. I think a lot of audiobooks and a lot of short stories and just forcing myself to read over the last handful of years has really changed that. And so when I got my hands on this book, and from being a huge fan of The Lord of the Rings, I was really ready to kind of try it out. And I was like, if it takes me a year to read it, it'll take me a year. And it took me a month. I just was smiling the whole time because I just did not think I could flip through this book like that. I thought it was going to take me 2 years, because some books have, but that was not this case. So here's my experience reading The Fellowship of the Ring. So it starts with me in Dublin. I like to tell this story because I think it's a part of the whole thing. But I was in a changing room in Dublin trying to buy some clothes. I think I needed a sweater because I was going from summer countries to winter countries. As I was in there, I hear a man yell, "There's only one person allowed in the changing rooms." And I knew that the store was busy, and so I was like, oh, somebody else must be in the changing rooms. And I hear the voice again, and he's gotten closer, and it's starting to get pretty aggressive. No one says anything. And so I'm kind of annoyed at this point, but I'm like, whatever. And so I think I'm shirtless, trying to get a shirt on. And he pounds on the door and says, "There's only one person allowed in the changing rooms at a time." And I open the door, and we both just kind of stare at each other with these mean faces. And he sees that I have a pair of shoes next to my feet, and from the outside, looked like there was two people standing in there, and it was a giant misunderstanding, and everybody in the store was watching, and we all laughed. And because of the misunderstanding, he gave me a free copy of The Lord of the Rings. I was really pleased to have a copy that looks a little more vintage, doesn't have, you know, the movie picture on it or anything modern, which I think is nice, because I knew reading this book I wanted to kind of have my own characters, my own voices. I didn't want to have any of the movies that I've seen a million times influencing the read. And obviously it's going to be hard to turn that off a bit, but it's just a pretty cover. I love this color and the illustrations on it. And so a week later, I was in the countryside in England, in the Devon area, where I have friends who I stay with. And what do I want to say here? And so I jumped into it, and it was probably one of my favorite reading experiences that I've had yet. And I think the reason for that is because of the actual experience of reading it. One, it's something I've wanted to read since I was a kid. I've really wanted to be a part of this book. You know, when you're a kid, this book was very intimidating. And I had some friends who had read it, and Tolkien's kind of known for being not a challenging read, but a very in-depth read. But that stuff aside, I'll get to that stuff in a second. What I really wanted to talk about was reading a book that was written in England. When you're in the South, was it the South? When you're in the Devon, Dartmoorish area, and reading something like this, I was reading it, you know, on the couch in the sun with like the dogs. I was walking to the pub, you know, that only has candles for light, and I would be drinking a pint, and I'd be surrounded by, you know, locals in this tiny area and a fireplace. I'd read there every night. Not every night, just by myself. And and the locals are talking about things, and they have these rich accents, which as an American you romanticize.
How you alright?
Doing all right. How you doing?
I'm going up to the shop. Do you need anything?
No, I'm walking that way, but I'm just filming things. So. Yeah.
And so I loved it. It felt like I was, you know, the inn or the bar, the pub that I was at. You know, I was a traveler there. There was a couple people who would shuffle in and out from different parts of the country who were traveling through with giant backpacks and things. And so it had a local feel, but also this kind of fantasy. You know, in the book, you know, there's chapters of dwarves coming through and rangers coming through, and it was really easy to romanticize. I even tried reading it in the bath at some point. That wasn't my favorite. It was just kind of hot. But, you know, I would go out into the farm shop and I'd read. And I would do kind of this hybrid reading style where I would do mostly reading from the paperback, but when I would go on walks to certain places, I would put in my earbuds and I would listen to Andy Serkis doing the audiobook, which he just recorded a couple of years ago. Andy Serkis, who plays Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. I thought I was going to do the entire book that kind of hybrid style, because I would listen to it while I cooked or while I did something that I couldn't, you know, have where I couldn't focus on reading the pages. But I was really surprised that I actually preferred reading it from the book, reading the text. I think it was because I was getting attached to the own images that I had in my head, and the certain things that I was envisioning for the characters, because like I said, I was really trying to have it be a different experience for the same story. Andy, who's a great actor, but just had a different style than I was hoping for. He was just reading it very animated and very kind of over the top, which makes sense for books that are this thick. You can't be dull. But I was just going through it much faster when I was looking at the page. But still, even listening to him was great, because I would go on these long walks and I'd be surrounded by ponies and sheep. And at one point I was wearing these wellies, these welly boots up on the moors, walking to there's this giant cross up there that's kind of known around the area. And my wellies were too small, so I had to take them off. So I was literally barefoot, walking in the grass, listening to The Lord of the Rings, and there's wind hitting my hair. And I'm just kind of a sucker for that. I'm a sucker for reading books. You know, if I'm in Japan, I want to read a Japanese author. You know, if I'm in Australia, I want to watch movies that are set in Australia at times. And I think it's just a great way to go about doing things. And when I get that chance, how could I resist? And so that alone made this a really enjoyable reading experience, because I just haven't had that, where I just felt like I was really immersed in it. Even when I was reading by myself at night, I would sometimes light a candle and I would put on this kind of ambient, experimental music that gave me this 80s imagery in my head of just 80s fantasy, or, you know, Jim Henson style. And I really loved picturing the hobbits and picturing these characters like that. So it was great. Yeah, I recommend that to anybody. I really, you know, to kind of mix and match and do that with if you're struggling to read, then I don't know, maybe. Here's where I stand on my, I guess, I don't know if I would call it my opinion of the book. I don't give books a rating typically, but I'd be curious if I enjoyed this book as much if I didn't love the movies, because I've already fallen in love with the characters, and so the author didn't have to make me fall in love with the characters. And I don't know if I would have with some of them. Reading this book, I was surprised that, you know, some of the, you know, how a few of the characters weren't as round as I was expecting. But there were certain parts, I think, where it would talk about, let's say, like Legolas and Smeagol and a bit of history with their characters that I didn't know, and I enjoyed because I know these characters. I liked knowing who's crossed paths when and where. But it was kind of our first time knowing about Legolas in the book. But I couldn't help but wonder that would I give a damn if I didn't already have this relationship with this character from the movies? Because I don't know who this character is, and all of a sudden we're on like this random tangent of a story that technically is nice in the grand picture, but for where I am right now in the book, I just wanted to keep going. And so I'd be curious, you know, because when I read something like this, I want to be able to know if I recommend it to somebody. And if somebody hasn't seen The Lord of the Rings, I'd be curious what they would think of this. Obviously, it's got generations of readers from before the movies came out, but that was just a different style of reader too, I think. I think readers nowadays are frankly just different. But my biggest takeaway probably is that I loved the escapism of it. I really loved just sitting down, laying on the couch, and flipping through the pages. And I didn't think I was that type of person. I didn't think that I was someone who enjoyed escapism. I think because I grew up as a kid, and my mind would always be daydreaming, and I would constantly, I couldn't focus on anything because I'd just be thinking about different, adventures and stuff in my head. And now I'm a bit older, I don't do that as much. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but now this book has kind of come into my life, and I need help. I need someone to hold my hand. I need, I'm experiencing someone else's daydreams and someone else's vision. And that's kind of my new chance to do that. And so I didn't need escapism as a kid, but as an adult, I need it. And so it's great. I think it really did kind of awaken something in me. I now know that I can read fantasy, and not only just fantasy, but, fantasy that's known for being a bit challenging. So I'm very pleased with that, and really happy and kind of excited to see where I'll go with my reading journey next. I'm not reading fantasy right now. I'm reading more modern stuff, but yeah, I don't know. So if you've read the book, I'd love to hear what your take on it and your whole experience and your relationship with the movies, the literature. Yeah, let me know if it was anything similar. I wish I could talk more about the specifics of it, but I think I need someone to talk to about that. I need someone to go back and forth about. The second I finished it, I called all my friends and who had read the books in junior high, and I was just grinning because I was happy. It was a challenge, and I never thought I would do it. So very pleased with that. But anyways, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you weren't looking for more of a specific type of review. I know a lot of people have a hard time picking up books these days, and so myself included, and I'm happy to see that that's changing a bit out there, and it's changing for me. So yeah, anyways, see you next time. I just remembered I also drew this picture of a hobbit while I was in England, and I was really pleased with myself, and I almost forgot to share it. Okay, now it's goodbye.